Hi, and welcome to Strategic Management Chapter 2, Industry Competition. So in this chapter, we're going to be talking about the industry, what is an industry, the life cycle of an industry, analyzing an industry's potential profitability using Porter's famous five-force model, and talk about some limitations of this model as well. So first thing we need to discuss is what is an industry. So basically an industry is going to be a group of companies that produce and compete in a similar product or service. Now, industries, some companies are easy to place within the industry. Some companies may exist in two industries if they have two different products they're offering or services. And some companies may be closely related to one or more industries. So, for example, if we're talking about the fast food industry, then we'd be talking about companies like McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Chipotle, Jack in the Box, Carl's Jr., these type of restaurants. But would you say that Panera Bread is a fast food company? No, it would not be in an industry. It would be in a sub-industry called fast casual. So, there is some subjectiveness to this industry. But basically, I think most people get the general idea. It's a group of like companies. Now, in an industry, there's something called a critical success factor. And this is some sort of particular element of that industry that is critical to the success of companies in that industry. It doesn't guarantee success, but it means that, for example, if it's a fast food industry, some critical success factors would be, um, the convenience of ordering, drive-throughs, cleanliness, um, price points on their products. So it would be, things that are any restaurant in the industry would need to be successful, but not guarantee success. So each industry has their own unique factors that a company most likely needs to possess in order to do well in the industry. Now, of course, there is, in order to help people better categorize and identify companies in the industry, they do have, a system with the SIC system and the newer NAICS, which is just a categorizing system with a number that would relate to. So each system would have a listing of industries and a corresponding number. So the companies would then be placed next to these numbers, to help organize them by industry and make it easier for people to look up these industries by these codes. So a primary industry consists of a firm's most direct competitors. So if you're talking about, the primary industry, we're looking at the most direct competition that the company would have with the most similar types of companies, most closely related to what the business that they do. So a secondary industry would include a less direct rival. So if we're talking about fast food restaurants, we know that Wendy's, Taco Bell, Burger King, McDonald's, these are all direct competitors. But secondary industry might include maybe a Starbucks that isn't a direct competitor but competes in some areas. For example, Starbucks overlaps with McDonald's with serving cafe-related drinks as well as breakfast sandwiches and other items. Okay, so market share. Market share is going to represent the proportion of sales that you attain in relationship to your rival companies in the industry. So market share is really the revenue that you are in dollars that you control of the total pie of revenue for an industry. Now, a relative market share would be the percentage of sales within the industry restricted to, say, a select number of competitors. So, if we're talking about the primary industry, we could say the relative market share for the primary industry, just the primary competitors. So we could break it down into that share as well. Okay, so identifying industry and competitors. Now, if we were going to make our own assessment, say we're going to draw our own industries up and think about companies, say we're going to try to make a map and place all food service companies in and try to put circles around certain industries and their market shares could be a nice project to familiarize yourself. If you were going to study or analyze a particular industry, you could sort of draw a map of the industry, put all the firms within it, and the direct competitors, the industry, and then the sub-industries around it. So not something that we're doing for this class, but is a nice little project if you're ever going to be an industry analyst on something. Okay, let's move over to the product life cycle. So product life cycle, but also industry life cycle. So a lot of industries are related to one product, but some industries can be multiple products depending on what they're manufacturing. Either way, there is a certain life cycle that many companies or products will go through. So let's talk about VCRs. There was a point where the VCRs were introduced in the late 70s, early 80s, and there was a high amount of growth throughout the 80s, and then there was a shakeout, and then a maturity. Maturity was reached when most people already had a VCR, and then a decline when new technology was introduced, such as compact disc or DVD, and that will put to a decline in the industry for VCRs. And VCRs they were basically tapes. You could do something similar for the, if you look at the CD music market, there was an introduction of CDs in the 80s, an extreme growth, then eventually a maturity level, and a decline when MP3s and downloads became more popular. So a lot of businesses don't last forever. There's a cycle, especially with electronics. There's a rapid amount of innovation, and new types of products are designed that replace or disrupt existing products, and that will hasten the decline of those products. And for example, a company or a product that's been in the maturity phase for a long time would be cars. So cars were introduced in the turn of the century, extreme growth, and then maturity probably in the 60s or 70s. And they've been in a mature market ever since then. So cars sales haven't declined, but they stayed at a mature level, meaning that they're selling basically replacements or maybe some new coming of age people who want to buy a car, but the extreme growth is kind of gone. You can also think about the TV industry. When we switched over from the big bulky cut-through ray tubes to the new high definition models of TVs, there was a huge decline in the old tube TV, and then sort of almost a rapid growth to maturity level of the new flat screen TVs that corner the market today, to the point where now a new 4K TV has come out with larger sizes that's sort of putting a decline to the original flat screen TV market and creating a new sub-market of these 4K high definition TV screens that are 55 inches and larger. So these cycles, as long as your company is on board with the new product replacing the old product, you can stay in business of the cycle. And that's what companies have to be aware of. Once they reach a maturity, what are they going to do to maintain that maturity in their market share? And if the product ever does go in decline, do they have a new product ready to replace it? Now, very famous Porter's 5 forces model. This looks at forces of strategy. And this chapter is all about external environment, and these are things that affect a company's strategy and a company's profitability. So we have, and we're going to talk about each of these individually, but basically barriers to entry, bargaining power of suppliers and or buyers, competitive rivalry, and threats of substitution. So we'll talk about this 5-force model. It's a very important, groundbreaking model when it comes to business strategy. Okay, so the 5 forces determine the potential for profitability. So this really tells you, if you analyze each of these forces, you get an idea of how profitable, how competitive, or possibly unprofitable an industry can be. So firms are definitely going to want to compete in industries that have the higher potentials for profit. So high profits in industry attracts more competition. So that is something that is just really a law of business. When you have a high profit area, other companies want to come in and have some of that lunch. Now, when we talk about rivalry among incumbent firms, is basically competition. So when we have this competition, that can result in price wars. When we see cigarettes or airlines or soda, commonly there are price wars. So, for airlines, when new discount airlines come in, there may be a price war with existing airlines. Um, there could be, if a new soda tries to come in and edge out Coke or Pepsi, they will increase their promotions and be more aggressive in their advertising, create an advertising battle. They will also Coke and Pepsi also routinely pay money to get the best shelves in the store. So they can also edge out the competition, making sure that their product is placed at the top or middle shelves, where newer entries or less successful products that don't have the money to pay what's called a slotting charge are placed at the bottom of the shelves, often next to the no frills brands. So also, what competitors can do is new product introductions. You look at the cell phones between Samsung and iPhones, new modifications of their products, somehow increasing customer service or warranties. If you look at, one thing Costco does when it sells this electronics on TVs and computers and iPads, they often double the manufacturer's warranty and also provide a separate independent warranty call line related to Costco, where customers can call in to talk about their warranty and possible things they can do to replace broken items. So these are just some competition things that other companies have to look at and know that they're going to be a factor in people's decisions to buy products. So let's look at some of the factors that influence this competitive intensity. So one is the concentration of competitors. Of course, so industries that are very profitable are going to have a lot of competitors. Now, if we have an industry with a few firms, it tends to be less competitive. So that means that companies can price a little bit more strongly. Companies can get away with a little bit more if there's less competition around for you to run to the minute you're dissatisfied. But if you have a market with many firms, that is going to be more competitive, as I think we can understand that concept. So each firm is going to fight for dominance. The very competitive marketplace could be, say, gasoline. There's a lot of different gas stations selling gasoline that really, lowers the amount of profit they can make per gallon. So if you're the only gas station in town, you can charge 25 cents a gallon in extra profits. But if you have a competitor or two across the street, that's going to be slimmed down to under 10 cents because of the competition, because people, gas is almost a commodity. So if you look at one gas station and say, oh, across the street is 15 cents less, you're going to drive across the street and buy the cheaper gas. Now, high fixed or storage costs, this is another factor in the competitiveness. So if you have a high fixed cost, you're more likely to cut prices. Well, what does that mean? So when you have a big factory and you have this excess capacity because you want to operate near the full capacity to be able to spread out your fixed costs, you're going to want to produce more units. So it's sort of like in the simulation we're playing, when you build a new factory, you don't want to build a factory just to sell, just to have 10% capacity. So the factory can make 1,000 cars. You don't want to make 100 cars with it. So maybe what you do is you lower your price, your sell price in your car, to increase demands, and now the factory could run at 90% capacity. Or maybe you want to increase your advertising budget or promotions to get your sales revenue up, so you can put a higher capacity utilization. So if you can get your factory at 100% utilization, the cost of that factory, the fixed costs associated with that factory, will be a lot lower per product. So oftentimes, if there's a high fixed cost or even high storage cost, think about refrigerated goods or costs, or maybe cars that need to have security to watch them, protect them, and they take up a lot of space and land. That high fixed cost means that you're going to rethink your pricing strategy, and if the cost of storage is going to start eating into your profits, you want to sell it sooner than later, so you might pass on that savings by selling it faster and not paying high storage costs, or having to produce more cars out of a factory, lowering your fixed cost per car. It would make sense to lower the price. In fact, you could become more profitable that way. But that's going to put some pressure if car companies, if we get into a downward swing of sales and everybody's trying to dump their models at lower prices or increase incentives, then that's going to be a downward run on profits, and that's generally a competitive market that happens. Now, if you have slow industry growth, say like cigarettes or soda, that's going to make people a little bit more competitive because you don't have that fast growth for everybody could share in their growth. If industries are growing so fast that is having hard for you just to keep up with demand, you're not going to really be looking towards stealing your competitors' sales. So in a slow growth industry, you're going to try to increase your market share primarily by stealing it from other competitors. So that would be a higher intensity in slow growth industries. Now, if there's a low, if the products are very similar among competitors and there's a low switching cost, so you think about gasoline is pretty much the same no matter what gas station you go to. And some people say, oh no, my Exxon gas is better. They do this, they do that. Not really. They all fill up at the same terminal. It's the same gasoline that's delivered to all the gas stations. No matter what brand you have in many areas, they're all pulling from the same terminal or the same reservoir of gas. So it really is the same gas. Now, if there's no switching cost to using a different gasoline at a different station, so that's going to be a higher intensity among competition, and that's why profits are so low, only a few pennies per gallon, because there's no switching costs really. There's no differentiation between the products. Now, if you do have say a car that can only take a certain type of fuel that only one gas station is selling, you are going to have to buy that at that price at that gas station. Otherwise, unless you bought a different car that could use a more common gasoline, say for example a diesel or an ethanol type of gas. Now, switching costs, if the customer does have to incur switching costs by moving to another company, say for example you're a PC person and you want to move to Apple, you're going to have to buy new Apple equipment. Maybe you'll have to buy new software. You're going to have to buy new extensions and cords and power supplies. And you're going to also have to relearn the new operating system. So those switching costs are going to really prevent you from moving from one company to another. So if the switching costs are high, a lot of companies will have a little bit more room to raise prices because they know that you're not going to give up on so easily, because the cost of switching is going to be a real hassle. So companies really dread the low switching costs. And look at the cell phone industry, when they're allowed customers to keep their phone numbers, that switching cost of having to change your phone number lowered it, made it easier for companies to move between phone companies. So there was less of a switching cost, and phone companies had to focus a little bit more on price or some differentiation to get people to be part of their phone company, such as offering free phones or free Netflix or some discount for family members. So that is something that companies are thinking about. Number 5, capacity. Looking about this is talking about not being able to make small increments of capacity. You have to make a large increment. So talking about airline industry, you have to put up a whole new plane. You can't just add 2 seats. Or for the so say you have a very popular route that you're always selling your flights out, and you could do extra flights that day. You may have to put in a new airplane. Or if you're in a market and you want to increase your capacity and you have to open up a new hotel, you're not going to just open up a hotel with 10 rooms. The hotel may have 80 rooms or 100 rooms. So the overcapacity could lead to prices being cut to make sure that these products clear their inventory. So that could be, if you have to put up your increments in large numbers, that could lead to oversupply. Now, factor 6, diversity of competitors. So companies that are diverse in who they are, their culture, their strategies, they have different goals, different missions, and different means of competing. They might have a difficult time fitting into the competitive mix, or what they call the rules of combat in a competitive rivalry. So it could make it more difficult or more intense depending on your angles may not fit the actual market, because the diversity of competitors may make it difficult really to compete against people who have a different spin on the market, or how they sell or service their products. Number 7, high strategic stakes. So uh, if you the competition can be very tough if a firm has high stakes in achieving success in a particular industry, meaning that it's critical for the overall company's success to succeed in one particular aspect of their industry. So say, for example, if you're Disney and you want to be competitive against Netflix, you have to make a streaming platform that's going to house and maintain your content. It's going to, you may be under pressure to offer it at a lower price to, remain competitive, because it's strategically important to distribute your content that way to the long run increase your returns. High exit barriers, meaning that it's difficult for you to get out of the industry, meaning that you have a lot of specialized equipment that you can't easily sell, or you might have a lot of legacy costs of pensions and employee benefits that you'd have to pay, that would keep the firm in business in the industry even at a low profit, because the cost of leaving the industry would be too prohibitive for some companies to take. Now, if we talk about a threat of entry, barriers to entry is good if you don't want any more competitors to come into an existing marketplace. So just think, if you're going to be a new airline, very expensive to buy all those multi-million-dollar planes and buy the rights to different airports to fly your planes to and from. So entry into the airline industry is very expensive. It's a barrier to entry that keeps a lot of new firms from coming into the industry. Such also with heavy manufacturing of construction vehicles or even regular vehicles is a high barrier to entry to set up those factories and get those supply chains running. So, and in some instances, companies that don't have high barriers may want to erect barriers, potentially keep competitors out of the industry, such as trying to make it difficult. Say Coke and Pepsi make it very difficult for new soda manufacturers to get into stores, to get on shelves. It may be maybe putting up new laws or regulations that are going to make it difficult for new companies to get into an industry by lobbying Congress. So let's talk about some of these threat factors. One is the economy of scale. So if you need a large scale to become profitable in the industry, meaning that you're going to have to ramp up to a high level of sales to have a significant cost advantage to remain competitive, that's going to be a big barrier. Because if you can't get in as a small operator and you can't make money to scale up to being very large, it's going to take a lot of money to get to the point where you can scale up to that level. So that's definitely, the bigger the economies of scale needed to remain profitable is going to prevent people from coming into the industry, because you're going to be spending so much. Okay, brand identity and product differentiation. So take a second to think about some of the brands that are very strong that you identify with, and that some brands that you're very loyal to, and think about how that's a strength to companies that have that strong brand identification or customer loyalties, which could be based on a perceived value, a perceived quality. So if you think of, some of my favorite brands are Poland Spring water, Southwest Airlines, Delta Airlines, Coke or Pepsi. A lot of people can be branded either Coke person or Pepsi person. Even when confronted with taste tests and they prefer the other product, they're still brainwashed to this Coke identity or this Pepsi identity. So it's very powerful and strong for a company to brainwash you into believing their products are superior in design and quality. And it's not often always the case. I mean, that's just their job, to make you think their product is so superior or have so much high quality or value. But in reality, that may not be the true essence of the product. But as long as they have that strong brand identity, people are going to pay extra or pay more for a product that they identify with the brand. Maybe it's Apple, maybe it's Under Armour. These are all strong brands that they know they're strong brands. They spent a lot of money in advertising to build up their brand, to get it to a point where they could sell it for more and increase their profitability. And this makes it very difficult for new manufacturers or new brands to come in and win you over as a customer. Once you're usually attached to a brand and you like a brand, you gravitate towards purchasing that brand more often than not. Okay. Capital requirements. So how much does it cost for a new competitor to come into an industry and become profitable and compete against existing competitors? So some very capital intensive industries, even if, say you want to open up a chain of movie theaters, that costs a lot of money to make a movie theater. You have to have a big specialized building with seats and projection equipment, just, very expensive to get in there and put that. It means you have to operate for a real long time to earn that money back that you put into that building. Or other capital intensive, if you're going to be a steel maker or an automaker, these are companies that require a lot of money to get started. It's not, so that's why some companies where maybe just a website, starting up a website is very low cost. You can start up a website and start selling your product very easily. Say you want to sell socks, you can start up a website to sell stocks and be in business very quickly. But if you want to set up a retail location, it's going to be more expensive to get that physical store location than a website. So the website would have a lower capital requirement than a brick and mortar. Switching costs, we talked about this earlier, but it definitely a factor. If the switching costs are low, that's going to be more of a threat to companies. When switching costs are high, then buyers have an incentive, to stay with their existing companies. So if the switching costs are very high, if you're going to switch to a new company, there better be a strong incentive to try a new competitor. So if prices are very high, that could be the incentive. If learning it could be a barrier to switching, or it could also be just the other components that would have to be updated or repurchased if you were to switch, say, from one computer to another, Apple to PC, or if you were to switch from anything that would have an additional cost to you, that you would think twice about doing it. So switching costs, when they're relatively low, are great for customers. For example, if you're going to switch to a new grocery store, you just have to really learn where everything is in the grocery store, so it may not be too difficult. But if you're going to switch to, say, a good example, if you were going to switch between different phones, there's a learning curve to use a different cell phone, because they all do things differently. So you may be very familiar with your Apple phone, and you have all of your photos and backups and apps all set on your iPhone to make it really easy when you buy a new iPhone to just try and transfer all that information over, all your contacts, all your phone numbers, and you're ready to go. However, if you were to get a different type of phone, then you'd have to start from scratch and learn how that phone operates, figure out a way to get all your data back into that phone. So the switching costs are something that you really have to have something compelling to make you switch if those costs are high. And that, as a company, protects you because your customers will put up with some nonsense before they'll switch. Okay. Now, entry factor number 5, access to distribution channels. So the soda distribution between the Coke and Pepsi have set up is very difficult. They have very extensive distribution networks that make it very difficult for new beverages to get distributed to supermarkets and 7-Elevens and wherever you would sell a soda, because they have the distribution routes and channels and shipping that is tied to their companies. So to get your product into some of these stores is very difficult. In addition to the slotting charges that they pay stores basically to shelve their product in prime locations, end cap displays. An end cap display is that at the end of the aisle there's this nice setup of all the products to highlight, say, Cheerios, and there are all these Cheerios boxes, and maybe they're on sale for the week. Cheerios pays money to get that end cap display promotion, and actually pays money to the supermarket to have them sell it on sale. So if a new entry wants to come into the the soda market or even the cereal market, they may have to create their own distribution channels. And that's one thing, say with music, it's very hard for independent music to be sold in a lot of music stores until they came up with digital downloads and downloading direct from websites. Made it a lot easier to distribute, and that barrier of entry came down as far as distribution of music when online music stores started to open up. Number 6, the cost disadvantages independent of size. So think of existing companies that may have developed patents or special technology. Now, if you think about the Hoover's Cyclone vacuum, or there are plenty of companies that have patents on their products or specialized technology, say the Roomba, the robotic vacuum cleaner. So these advantages are not related to the firm's size and can easily be taken over by newcomers, because they can be sued if they steal their technologies. They would have to either pay a royalty to use it. So these advantages of having this technology in place and having the ownership of these copyrighted characters or technologies discourages other firms from trying to compete in that industry. So these cost advantages, they're independent of the size. As long as you have the patent, it doesn't matter how big or small you are, it's going to make it difficult for other companies to get in there. But cost advantages that are dependent on size are the economies of scales and barriers to entries. We talked about it earlier. Number 7, government policy. So governments often control a lot of industries, have regulations, licensing requirements. Think of a local store. If you're a local store or restaurant that wants to open up and you want to serve alcohol, there's a lot of additional licensing requirements needed to get that license to sell alcohol. So it's not easy to open up a bar and get the paperwork and the permits to sell alcohol. And that's one barrier to entry that's related to government policy or regulations. The same thing with providing electricity or providing certain cable services. There could be requirements in how they operate. In addition to, if you want to open up a private school, there are going to be some government policies about what you'd have to do to open up. So you can kind of think of this as red tape. The stickier the red tape and the more red tape that's involved to start your business, the less companies are going to want to deal with that. Okay. Now, pressure from substitute products. Now, Pepsi is not a substitute product to Coke. They're both cola beverages. However, water is a substitute product to Coca-Cola. So it's a different product that satisfies the same need. So the need might be to drink something to drink with a meal, or just a beverage. So a beverage can be satisfied by a cola or a juice or a water, but someone's not going to order a juice and a soda together. So they're substitute products. You could have a substitute product. For example, if you're thinking about a computer, but instead of a computer you go with a tablet, an iPad, that could be a substitute product for a computer. It's not the same thing as a computer, but it might solve the problem you have, which means you want to work on email or you want to do certain games. The iPad may satisfy that need, but it's not generally what we'd think of as a personal computer. So if substitute products are present and able to solve the same issue that the product is needed for, that could be additional competition that you can't compete with. So if, say, you're milk and new products come on, such as almond milk, soy milk, they're not milk, they're not dairy, but they would, people would use them to put in their coffee or their milk or their cereal. That could be considered a substitute product. So it's an alternative, not identical to the product you're offering, but an alternative that would eliminate the need for your product. So the more pressure you have for substitute products, the more strain you could have on increasing your sales. So when bottled water became very popular, that took away a lot of sales from soda, as people wanted a healthier alternative, and they wanted, say, a package of Poland Spring or the new Core brand or anything like this. You might go into 7-Eleven and buy a bottled water or soda, but not both. Okay. But now let's look at the bargaining power of buyers. So if you're buying something and you're a buyer who, you're going to purchase a significant percentage of someone's sales in the industry. So you're the company's number one buyer. You buy the most from that company. That gives you power. So that's what we would call a bargaining power of a buyer. If you're that important of a customer, you can start requiring some discounts. You could start looking for the company you're buying from to provide something extra for you. Now, you have more bargaining power, of course, the more you buy from one company. And you also have more power if the product's more standardized, that you can move, to different manufacturers or providers to get that product, or maybe raw material. Maybe there's a particular raw material you need, like coal or oil, that you can, as a large buyer, you can move to the competition, and they'll gladly take you on and give you a significant discount just to get your business. Now, you're going to have the bargaining power when buyers have, when there's not a lot of switching costs. It doesn't cost you much or anything to switch. It means you're going to have more power because the company's not going to have anything over you that is going to lock you in. That's why home heating oil likes to lock customers in with contracts and make it difficult to switch, because home heating oil is basically diesel fuel with some red dye in it. It makes it very easy for you, if you're going to pay in the cash market, to choose whoever's offering the lowest cost fuel. Now, if buyers earn low profits, this could, create a lot of pressure on them to get the best price possible for whenever they're buying. So if the buyer's business is a very low profit business, then they're going to really look to have to create some sort of pressure or develop buying groups to reduce their purchasing costs. If the buyers have the ability to become their own supplier, meaning that if you're routinely buying a particular type of raw material, maybe you're McDonald's buying potatoes to make French fries, and if the potato growers, if they start having, McDonald's feels like they're taking advantage, McDonald's can get in the business of growing their own potatoes. That would keep suppliers a little bit more competitively minded. So any place where the buyer can start their own business and supply themselves, that's going to put some pressure on to keep prices lower for them. If industry products have relatively unimportance, if the product they're buying is unimportant to the quality of the buyers of the end products or services, that could give the buyer more strength. But if it's something, if the buyer has to buy, say, organic ingredients, that's very important to make an organic version of the product, that may force them to have to pay a higher price, since the organics, there's less of it and there might be a scarcity. Buyers have complete information. So, for example, Walmart often requires companies to give the information, or they acquire the information on the company's cost, how much it costs them to make a product, and then that gives Walmart, besides their economy of scale, also some leverage to say, we're buying all these socks from you. We know that it costs you 50 cents a pair. We want to buy it from you at 60 cents. We think 10 cents is appropriate profit for you. So kind of, once they know what cards you're holding, like a game of poker, they can place their bets a little bit more advantageous to Walmart when they know exactly what your cost and production capabilities are. Now, on the other side of the coin, you can have a market where suppliers have more bargaining power. So if you're an industry where there's only a couple of companies who are supplying that raw material or finished good product, you have more power as a supplier. If it's very difficult to have a substitute product where there really isn't a substitute product to what you're offering that's going to really solve the problem, then you have more strength as a supplier. There's no one company that's a major customer to you as a supplier, so no one's going to have that increased leverage over you. It's going to give you more strength as a supplier. If you're capable as a supplier becoming your own sort of forward integration, creating your own customer. So for example, if you're, say you're a vitamin manufacturer that manufactures vitamins and you sell to vitamin stores, if you have the ability to set up your own stores to sell directly to customers, then that's going to make you as a supplier more powerful. And that's something that Apple did when they had a hard time at one point getting their products into Circuit Cities and Best Buys and electronic stores in general. So what they at one point, since it was really difficult to get their full line of products into a lot of stores, they decided to make their own retail and become their own customers, as well as selling their products everywhere else. This actually helped once they saw how profitable and how much business these Apple stores were doing. Then other stores like Best Buy wanted to carry a bigger, more full line of Apple products. The same thing with Target and Costco. Supplier products are differentiated or have some built-in switching costs, meaning that if you switch the product over, that you'd have to buy all new cables or all new power supplies or all new attachments to get your product to work with your existing machinery or equipment. That's going to give you more power as a supplier when the switching costs are higher. And a lot of companies will build in switching costs, and sometimes companies will try to build in a switching cost and fail, and customers will not want to get involved with the product because they realize, they see up front that there's a switching cost. For example, Sony often failed by making new types of music players. So one time the Sony made a Discman with these small compact discs. That would mean that everybody would have to repurchase their music into this new Sony format, which ultimately led to the failing of their hardware product that was the Sony mini disc players. And also Sony at one point tried to make their own memory cards that would work only with Sony products. So again, if you bought a Sony camera, you couldn't use your SD cards. You had to buy their special Sony memory cards. So they're trying to build in a switching cost that if you have all your photos and everything on their memory cards, you're going to want to stay with the Sony cameras or Sony products. And again, a lot of consumers saw this and said, I don't want to have to rebuy all these memory cards or have to be stuck in the supply chain of these memory cards. And that often fail if companies get too greedy. If consumers figure out the greediness of these built-in switching costs that they put into their products they really don't need. Okay, there's some limits to this 5 forces model that we've been talking about. It is because the model assumes a very clear lines when we're talking about the industry, just a really clean cut, no messiness between companies in the industry. So it doesn't consider industries that may bleed over between two different industries, or if there's partner firms between industries, and that is some limitation of this model. Also assumes that large firms cannot influence the industry structure, and that's definitely not true. Large firms can have an influence of the overall industry structure and set certain standards. It assumes that industry factors, not firm resources, are the primary profit drivers, and that's not always true. It's difficult to apply to firms operating in multiple countries where the industry environments vary considerably, and that is a problem with the model, definitely. So it's not a perfect model, but it's a model, and some of these case analysis that you could look at if you want to apply a 5-force model to analyze particular industry with a SWOT analysis. That's something you could do. Or if you want to look at what firms in the industry have succeeded while others have failed in the past. These are just little things you can think about. They're just ideas to kind of think about to help reinforce what we learned so far in this chapter. That you may, if you want to look at those slides in the PowerPoint, kind of think about that. Okay, so that's it for chapter 2. I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I look forward to talking to you in chapter 3. Thank you. Take care.